What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back for another episode of Poker Hands. Today, we're going to be breaking down a bluff that I ran in my Heads Up challenge. It was actually a pretty interesting hand that we're going to break down. We're going to look at some solver analysis. I'm going to talk to you about exactly what was going through my head while I did it. Now, we are analyzing a Heads Up hand to celebrate the launch of the End Boss system, my new Heads Up No Limit course, where myself and Fabian Adler will be teaching you exactly how to play Heads Up No Limit at the absolute top tier level to make you an end boss in your shorthanded game. The course will contain between 30 to 35 hours of recorded content from myself and Fabian. I'm in about half of the course. And basically, we're going to walk you through step by step exactly what it takes to be able to battle at the absolute top level. We're going to have all of the heads up pre-flop charts that you're going to need. We're going to talk about optimal flop sizes for every board. And we're going to walk you through how to take wide ranges and create good, solid strategies based off heuristics that we've learned over the years. The course will cost $999 and it will be launching on October 9th. So if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below and you can check it out. All right, let's get back down to business here. So let's go ahead and jump into the action.
32.
Our hand begins at 200, 400 on roughly 225 big blinds. This is a fairly deep stacked heads up no limit game. We open the button with queen deuce of hearts, as we will do with our open range, which will be about 84, 85% of all hands. And now Kevin looks down at the pocket aces. You never want to trap pre-flop and heads up no limit. And guys, just a good tip at home, you almost never want to trap aces. There are some specific scenarios where you might want to mix it in from time to time in some ring games, but definitely not when you're facing an open in the big blind, especially as you get deeper. Kevin decides to go 3,200. This is actually a little bit smaller than I would recommend. I think Kevin might have some solutions that say a smaller size is actually more optimal. My work I've done has shown that this is, simply speaking, just too small of a 3-bet for this stack size. I would recommend something more like 36, 3,700. Anyway, he does make it 3,200. Back over to me now. You're going to play a lot of hands as you get deeper. This is the kind of hand with queen deuce of hearts. If he made it something more standard, I would probably just fold to the 3-bet. But given that I am getting a great price here in position, we're going to want to at least call. This hand could be a good candidate to 4-bet every now and then. An example of this is king deuce suited often as a 4-bet in many pre-flop ranges for heads up no limit. As this size gets a bit smaller, I wouldn't be surprised to see queen deuce get in there every now and then as well. In this specific hand, we do decide just to call, and let's take a flop.
Kevin's got the aces again. He had those 6 times yesterday.
Was it 6? That's outrageous. I don't think I've seen 6.
It is a lot.
6 aces within like a month. He gets them in a heads-up match within 8 hours. Add it to the pile.
Doug's going to come with a bet here versus this check, drawing pretty thin. But Kevin probably doesn't love that flop with his aces.
The flop comes jack 10-4 all spades. Both of us have missed the flop, but Kevin does have an overpair, and I've got, I guess, some cards. The first question Kevin has to ask himself here on the flop is what size c-bet does he want to use with his total strategy? Now, typically speaking, monotone boards like small sizes, and I could give you some human-y stuff as to exactly what you should do and why, but instead, I'm just going to show you what the solver would do. This is a spreadsheet of all flop sizes for 3-bet pot. We use neural networks to run about 10, 11, 12 different sizes for flop sizes and look what is optimal for all sizes given our pre-flop ranges. I will note this includes a slightly larger size 3-bet because that's what we had as optimal. And so there might be a slight difference between those two sizes. That said, This sheet will be very accurate, and we're going to be going through this sheet inside the course. We're going to walk you through optimal sizes for all boards and how we can bucket those together into an effective strategy. So typically speaking, I use 15% pot as my 3-bet pot size. You might have seen in some games, I bet this size, it looks comically small, and it is comically small. I mean, 15% pot is a very small size bet, and even when you go that size, you can only bet 44% of the time. So you can't bet very often, and you can't bet very big. Monotone boards are fun for everyone. Over to the PO solver solution now, as I've awkwardly placed myself in a box between hole cards. You can see that this lines up with the solution. In our solution here for PO solver, we see that the solver likes to bet 44% of the time, and when it uses this small 15% pot size. So we can see those things kind of line up. I will note, I had to make some slight adjustments to the pre-flop range because, again, optimal in my solutions is not the size Kevin is using. So I'm making a couple of slight changes here to the range to make it a little more accurate. But of course, there's some chance it is slightly off. Anyway, if Kevin does use the optimal size for this flop, you'll see that ACES does do a lot of checking. In fact, when he has ACES without a spade, 75-ish% of the time, he will be checking on the flop. Now, one thing that I do, I like to round things into quarters when I play live poker. So I do things either 0, 25, 50, 75, or 100. I don't try and go for 10 or 8 or 27. It just gets too complicated. I round into those quartiles, and that's my approach for playing live poker. I go really in depth in this inside the course, but for the sake of this video, when I talk about how often I'll do something, I will be rounding to those numbers roughly. All right, so we can see here when Kevin does have his aces, specifically when he has the ace of diamonds and the ace of clubs, he is going to be checking here 70% of the time. He does decide to check now over to me with the queen deuce of hearts, and this is where you guys are going to just probably be quite surprised, or maybe you know this. I don't know. You guys are all geniuses. I'm sure someone will leave a comment about exactly what you're supposed to do. But there is a situation here where you're actually betting this flop with queen deuce of hearts 55% of the time. Now, I input that I'm going to be using a quarter pot bet versus a check on the flop. So that's the input size. And now I'm running based around that. And there's a really interesting concept here that actually I talked about with Brady in an upcoming episode of the Level Up podcast and Upswing. Basically, when you get check to in 3-bet pots, a lot of your bluffs are not hands that you would really expect. They're hands that are just kind of towards the bottom of your entire range. This happens a lot more in position than out of position. Out of position, typically speaking, you just need more card removal, more equity to be able to bet. In position, your bluffs can be a lot bluffier because they are more efficient as bluffs, and it's harder for the big blind to be able to play back at you because ultimately you do have position on later streets. So queen deuce of hearts bets the flop here a lot, 55% of the time. I don't know what I rounded to in game. I am quite aware of this concept where your most gapped hands, your ace deuce, king deuce, queen deuce, your low suited connector, like 3 deuce suited here, those hands tend to be some of your most common bluffs and barrels. So I'm sure I had a nice healthy portion of flop bets here when I had queen deuce of hearts. But you can see this is actually not spewtastic, and that might surprise some of you guys that are used to playing in some tighter games. Back over to Kevin facing this 1/4 pot bet. When he has aces, no spade, the only play he can really make is to call. If he does have a spade here, he can decide to go for a check raise. Check raising actually does happen here about 10% of the time, a decent portion of check raising going down the flop. But I will note the size is quite small. I put in 2.25x here, so if I bet 1,600, Kevin should make it 3,600 here about 10% of the time. Either way, when Kevin does have pocket aces without a spade, this hand is a slam dunk check call. So far, I would say a pretty well played hand from both of us. Let's go ahead and take a turn.
Doug picks up a straight draw. Someone's saying in chat, no wonder Kevin won yesterday if he had aces 6 times. To be fair to Kevin, he really didn't make the money with his aces. Obviously, getting aces 6 times is amazing, but the money he made was running good in other ways. And, of course, playing great as well. Don't want to detract from that at all. Doug goes for a bet on the turn here with his straight draw. This is an interesting spot. Obviously, Doug can just hit that 9 on the river and have the best hand, but I'm pretty sure if the river is any spade, Doug is going to be able to successfully bluff here. That's one reason Doug is going to bluff with a hand like this, which doesn't have that much equity because...
The turn comes the 8 of diamonds, a card that's definitely better for my range than it is Kevin. Some straights have gotten there, and some of my bluffs have picked up pair equity type hands as well. Also, if I was bluffing with something pretty questionable on the flop, like for example Queen Deuce, I now have a gutter. Definitely not a card that Kevin likes to see. In the solver analysis, Kevin should be checking all of his hands, and now we can quickly look at what kinds of bet sizes does the solver like to use on the turn. And this is where, this is actually a really kind of cool spot because it highlights how difficult things can be to parse. Now, I've used several different sizes here in position after the flop goes check call. I put in a full pot, I put in a 2/3 pot, I put in a 1/3 pot size, and ask the solver which one does it prefer. It's pretty close between the full pot and the 2/3 pot. You can see that 18% of the time the solver would use full pot, 17% it would use 2/3 pot, and 11% it would use 1/3 pot. So what is the size that we should use? Well, we can actually solve down and see what the EV difference of all these three sizes is to see what size is optimal. I can actually show you guys exactly how I'm going to do this. So I have a subtree configuration put in here. Let's put in 33% pot and run it, and it will tell us exactly what the EV is for 1/3 pot. Thomas, you can put up on the bottom of the screen exactly what it is. So if I use 1/3 pot, my EV is 511.5. That's 1,000 actually, guys. So 5,114 is my EV with the 1/3 pot size with my range. If I put in 2/3 pot, you can see it's a bit higher. 5,169, so that's a better size for my strategy. And if I put in full pot, it is 516.8. So 5,167. So very similar EV between 2/3 pot and full pot, but 2/3 pot just slightly better of a strategy. I'm going to pause for a moment and talk about that. I know this is getting nerdy, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. I love getting into the nerdy nitty gritty. I find it very fun, and it's one of the reasons why I think I have enjoyed my stint at playing Heads Up No Limit again over the last few years. One of the great things about Heads Up No Limit is we can compare different sizes and look at the best value of the strategy. Typically speaking, when someone check calls the flop and the turn creates straight draws, usually, or complete straights, I should say, usually 2/3 pot ends up being what you want to use. Total bricks tend to like pot. Flush cards tend to like about 60-67% pot. Board pairs can be kind of all over the place depending on how likely the pair is. The point of the matter is, on a card like the 8 here, usually 2/3 pot is preferred. And so even though there might be some spots where it might be closer to 100% pot, like for example, if this turns a 7, it might be a bit better to go more like that size. The point of the matter is you create this framework that you know from your work off table and you apply it in game. So I bet 6,400 here in the 9,600 with the idea that my bet size that's best size here should be 2/3 pot, and we just showed why that is in the solver. Putting myself back in this awkwardly placed box, we can now see what my bet range looks like on the turn, and this is where I'm very proud of myself, guys. I gotta say, Queen Deuce of Hearts bets this turn 88% of the time. This is a slam dunk, absolute gotta have it type turn rail. In fact, show me a bluff that it likes more. I don't think you can find one. I think this is my #1 best bluff candidate. 3 deuce suited is definitely up there as well. Another hand that I'm sure you're very excited just to go to town with. So Queen Deuce of Hearts, you just got to do it. In fact, if you're rounding things to quarters, so this would be 75 or 100, you're probably looking at a stone cold 100% turn barrel. So this is just a good bet for me on the turn. Over to Kevin. What does he do now with the pocket aces? All aces are pure check call here. They're just simply put too good to let go. You actually can beat some value bets. I mean, if I'm looking at some of the hands I'm betting on the turn, ace jack mainly betting, king jack not betting very often. In fact, you're almost always checking, but it's possible it could have king jack or queen jack with a spade. Some 10x hands are getting in there a little bit as well, some denial. Basically, when you have aces, you're just too high up in your range to be able to fold. And at the same time, you are not strong enough to be able to raise. Not much raising happens here if you do use a very small size, a min raise type size here. Or sorry, not min raise. What am I talking about? If you do use a 3.5x size here, kind of a more standard size. You will raise about 5% of the time, so I take back what I said. Some occasional raising. It is polarized between having the ace of spades, ace king, ace of spades, ace queen, ace of spades, king, queen with a spade are your bluffs. And then you get in there with some top set and some occasional flushes. Anyway, with aces for Kevin, slam dunk check call. We're playing this perfect all streets so far from both players, and let's go ahead and take a river.
If the river does come a spade, he actually has something to bluff with. But that's not going to happen. We get the 7 of diamonds river. There's a one-liner to a straight now, though. Any 9. Doug is reaching for a big stack of chips here. It's going to put Kevin to the test.
Appears to be 30,900. Let me confirm that first.
That's a big bet from Doug. Over 1.5 times the pot, it looks like.
30,900. I'm sure.
Yeah, this puts aces in a pretty
Yeah, 1.5 times the pot.
miserable spot.
Yeah, I wonder if Kevin would prefer to have the ace of spades in his hand here. I think he would.
River comes an offsuit 7, making it 1 to a straight now, and Kevin checks once again, as he should with all of his hands. Over to me in position now. Queen deuce of hearts, absolutely always a triple barrel. You will never be checking this one back. The question, though, it becomes, what size do we want to use? Now, in game, I stumbled around and didn't have a calculator and ended up trying to bet 150% pot and bet a weirdly non-150% pot amount. So let's just kind of throw away my size exactly to the side, because I'm clearly trying to go 1.5x pot, and I can't do basic math while playing super high stakes heads up no limit. I put a bunch of sizes to the solver and asked, what size do you like here, solver? And man, a lot to kind of dissect. The solver would use just some jamming. It would use some 1.5x pot like I did. It would use some full pot. It would use a lot of 2/3 pot, and it would never go 1/3 pot. Here's a good tip for people learning poker in general. If on the river you bet 1/3 pot or smaller in position, you almost certainly made a mistake. There are some specific examples that is not true, but if you're ever betting 1/3 pot on the river or less, if you see someone do it, if you do it, if that happens, you can just go ahead and assume that the player does not know what they're doing. Generally speaking, river bets in position should be at least half pot, but usually 2/3 pot or more. Anyway, let's get into this a bit. So obviously we cannot use 5 sizes. So how do we approach this, Doug? What do I do? So typically speaking, on the river, it's the first street. You have to have 2 sizes. The way I look at this is I will have a smaller one and a bigger one. My smaller size in position on the river it's just always 2/3. I'm sure there are spots where it's better to have 100% pot and an all-in, whatever. My smaller size in position is always 2/3 pot. The reason is that I know that size is going to be the smaller of my 2 options. My bigger option will be 150% pot or all-in. You never really have to break outside of that framework. Maybe there's some 4 straight spots where you want to go like 1/3 pot and full pot, something like that. But generally speaking, you're going to want to go 2/3 pot and 150, or 2/3 pot and all in. So in this spot specifically, it looks like it's probably going to prefer 2/3 pot and all in, meaning that my size, probably not great. Not terrible, but probably not great. We can actually quickly see the EV difference of these 2 strategies. So my strategy would be 14,676 in position, and the correct strategy that uses an all-in size instead of my size would be 14,803. So it's a small difference here. My big size should be jam, but it's going to cost me like $100. I think that's something I'm willing to live with. A key takeaway for me is on monotone boards, if I bet flop, bet turn, I should probably have just an all-in and a small size, but that could be to do with the fact there's a 4 straight here. Yeah, we'd have to look at some examples. I'm getting too off the path. Okay, back to the hand. So what should I be doing here using the fact that I want to have a 2/3 pot and a 150% pot strategy? And where exactly does queen deuce fall in that? Does it fire the river? Well, if we run this hand, and it's going to almost instantly be down to an accurate result, you can see queen deuce of hearts about 1 out of 4 times is going to be using a 150% pot size, and the rest it goes small. I think that I might have been doing a little bit too much big size, and that big size maybe should just be all in. This is the first part where maybe I made a mistake on my size. Usually when you're looking at your small size and your big size, you want to bluff in your big size because you get to have more bluffs. You're giving your opponent worse odds. That said, you do want to bluff the smallest size some of the time, and your hands with the worst card removal will be your best small size bluffs. We don't have a spade here, which makes this hand a bit worse for us to want to bluff with. So this has some characteristics of a hand that does like the small size, and in retrospect, I like that play a bit better. For some contrast, if I had a hand like king queen with a spade, here it loves just to blast away for the big size because you do block those hands that have a high spade that might be looking to call down. So all in all, a very nice hand selection. Some slightly suboptimal sizes, although I am sure I used some 2/3 pot here as well. Quick note, if I have a 9, I want to use this small size, right? If I have like 9-5 of hearts. So if I have 9-5 of hearts, I typically want to use that small size to get some value. You cannot bet thinner than a 9 here for value. Notice pocket jacks is going to be checking back on the river. So small size reps a 9, big size reps a flush. Your flushes mainly go big. Some of them go small, especially if it's a flush with a 9 where you block calls. And then your bluffs, your good candidate ones go big, and your non-good candidate ones, you use the small one. I hope that is simple enough. I know it's still complicated. One more note, you mainly use 2/3 size with that being 41% of the time, and your big size gets used about 1 out of 5 times. When I do go this large size, Kevin, pure fold here from ACES, really nothing you can do other than check fold. You just don't have enough card removal to put in the check call. Pocket kings, for some reason, is a bit better of a call. There's got to be some properties with the king of spades that make it more attractive. But the point of the matter is, Kevin nailed this hand every street, played in the absolutely optimal line. So, guys, that's just how it works sometimes. Sometimes one player makes a bluff that might be good, might be bad. In this case, I do think it was a good bluff. And the other player with a better hand simply just has to fold if they want to make the solver approved play. That said, if you get an inkling, you can decide to put your foot down and make the call. But in this one, we managed to get one through.
Spades blocks those flushes.
Fold!
There's another side of that, though, which is Doug might bluff with the ace of spades in his hand.
Well, I already know what happens.
He gets
Wow,
it
Doug
through.
gets it through.
Fun card here.
Gets it through.
Thank you for joining me for this today, guys. I will be back again next week. Again, if you want more information about my upcoming heads up course, you can check it out in the description below. See you guys.